Welcome to the Sportsfit Mum Podcast, the place for expert knowledge and advice for your pregnancy and post-baby health and fitness journey. If we haven't met before, I'm Marnie, mum of two, health and fitness coach, international athlete and founder of the Sportsfit Mum community. Join us each and every week for lots of motivation and inspirational stories for you, the sport-playing, exercising, loving mum or mum. Welcome to the Sportsfit Mum Podcast, the place for expert knowledge and advice for your pregnancy and post-baby health and fitness journey. If we haven't met before, I'm Marnie, mum of two, health and fitness coach, international athlete and founder of the Sportsfit Mum community. Join us each and every week for lots of motivation and inspirational stories for you, the sport-playing, exercising, loving mum or mum. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Sportsfit Mums Podcast. Today I want to chat a little bit about core training in pregnancy, what it is, why we need to do it, the do's and don'ts that we hear about all the time. And I'm going to start as well by talking about diastasis recti. This was a term that scared me a lot in my first pregnancy. I tried desperately hard to try and figure out what it was. Was it bad? I saw a lot online, especially YouTube, workouts or exercises to do not to reduce diastasis recti, and then exercises postpartum to try and heal diastasis recti. But I think unless you have an understanding of what it is, and actually you learn not to be really scared about it, you might find that you feel way more comfortable in core training during pregnancy. And adding core training to your pregnancy fitness regime is super simple. It's really easy to do, and actually even adding it as a warm-up or an accessory exercise in your other workouts or even strength training is really beneficial. So I just want to start by saying that I am not a medical professional, so a little disclaimer here. I do have personal training and strength and conditioning experience and knowledge. I always recommend seeing a women's health physio pre and postnatal. And actually, if you just think something's just not quite right, seek help for it because it's probably not right at all. But I do want to share my knowledge around the do's and don'ts for core training during pregnancy. Okay, well, let's start by just making sure we know what core training is. So your core is not just your six-pack, although I've never had a six-pack. But if you have a low body fat percentage and your six-pack is visible, massive high fives to all of us, actually, because I'm sure that we are training our core in many different ways with many things we do. And the reason we can train our core in many different ways is because it consists of many different muscles. So the core system includes your lower back muscles, your diaphragmatic muscles, the abdominal muscles, and there's quite a few, your deep core muscles, so the transverse abdominal muscles, your rectus abdominal muscles, they're the lateral muscles on the outer wall, and your obliques. The core system also includes your pelvic floor muscles and your glutes, and these all work together to pretty obvious keep your organs inside your body. This core system creates stability for you and it allows movement. They all work together to allow you to move your body in different directions. But during pregnancy, the growing uterus does stretch the abdominal muscles. It can cause your glute muscles to switch off. It can put extra pressure down on your pelvic floor muscles, and it can put extra pressure on your lower back muscles as well. So when you hear the term diastasis recti, what that is referring to is the rectus abdominal muscles, the two lateral muscles of the abdominal wall. They do separate, they become separated, and the connective tissue that's over the top of that widens and thins out and almost splits that rectus abdominis in half. And that connective tissue is called the linea alba. Now that linea alba actually runs from the bottom of your sternum all the way to the top of your pubic bone. And a lot of the time when that linea alba does thin and widen, it can actually cause a bit of a bulge. And this is the condition which is called diastasis recti. So there's different severities of it. You could have one finger separation between your rectus abdominis muscles. You could have two fingers. You could have up to five. There's different severity of it. There is a lot of ways you can measure. Definitely do your education around this. Jump on YouTube and have a little bit of an idea. You could do a self-diagnosis of your separation. Not all diastasis recti can be seen externally, so there's not always a bulge, okay? It might be more internally. You feel quite a lot of lower back pain. You might feel very tense and sore when you're sitting up, when you come into a sit-up position. And I think what's really important to note is that it's actually really common in pregnant women. And actually, just as a side note, it's quite common in men as well from yo-yo dieting generally. It's quite a common occurrence if weightlifting's done the wrong way. Having more than one child can increase the severity of diastasis recti. I think it's really important to note here as well is that there is quite a lot of research out there. There are research that I've read around 100% of women will have abdominal wall separation at the time of birth, which kind of does make sense because as your baby's growing, you have to make room for it. And those abdominals do need to separate, absolutely. But then there's other research that says only 2/3 of pregnant women will experience diastasis recti. So I think the takeaway point here is that it is common. And actually, it's more common in women over 35. It's more common if you're growing a heavier baby, if you have twins or triplets. And actually, genetics does play a significant role in how much those abdominal muscles will separate. So for most of us, it's just simply how our bodies respond to our pregnancy. And actually, that's okay. That is okay. What we can do is we can try to prevent the severity of the abdominal separation, and we can put in place a plan to strengthen those abdominal muscles postpartum to ensure a quicker recovery. Now, I am a huge believer in not waiting 6 weeks postpartum to start your core strengthening work. I'm not talking wait 6 weeks to go running. I am talking to activate your diaphragmatic muscles again, activate those glutes, do some really deep core transverse abdominal exercises, which I will talk through when I talk about fourth trimester fitness and also in my watch program it's the 8 weeks out program, so postpartum prehab. And the reason I call it prehab is that we're doing specific exercises that prevent injury for when we're back at full capacity. So we really are trying to do exercise to strengthen our core muscles. Okay, a little bit of side note there. So I've told you a little bit about diastasis recti, my knowledge of that, and why I think it's important to train our core during pregnancy. So let me talk about first the don'ts that we hear about core training, or the abdominal muscles that we hear we shouldn't, abdominal exercises we hear we shouldn't do. Okay, so let's start with the don'ts. Okay, so the do's and don'ts of core training during pregnancy. So there are quite a few exercises that you do need to be careful with as you go throughout your trimesters during your pregnancy. And the reason for this is that a lot of the time, although they might feel great and you might be really excited that you can still do them, actually it's putting a lot of extra pressure on your pelvic floor and it's probably worsening that abdominal separation. So some exercises to be wary of are crunches and sit-ups, push-ups, front planks. Although you probably still can do them, it is likely that these are going to increase that abdominal wall and put extra pressure down on the pelvis, likely have an extra pelvic tilt. It may even affect your breathing or some lower back pain. So you have to think to yourself, can I still do these exercises? how do I feel? Is it worth me keep going, knowing that actually I could be increasing the abdominal separation? The more abdominal separation you have in your postpartum, the more strengthening of your core deep muscles you will need to do, abdominal muscles you will need to do, and likely the longer your postpartum recovery. So we do need to think about the juggle between what feels good versus what we think might be good for our bodies at this time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sportsfit Mums Podcast. It's awesome to have you along.
If someone says don't
if
do
you
it,
would like to join our community,
anyway.
follow us
And I'm going
on
to tell you a little bit of story
at
about that
Sportsfit
later.
Mums on
But
Instagram.
the two things that I do want to
Alternatively,
recommend
do
is
check out the
really begin that
subscription
core
notes,
strengthening,
as you will see a link
obviously
to our
before being
ultimate
pregnant, but
fitness in
you're likely
pregnancy
listening to me
mini guide.
right now, pregnant or postpartum.
From here, you'll also
But we
get
do want
some
to, the
details
best time
of the
to
up and
train our
coming
core
release
is
of the
before getting
new
pregnant and within the
strength and
first
conditioning
trimester
prehab
if you
program
can.
for
I
your
also,
fourth
like I said
trimester.
before,
So it's
highly
called 8
recommend
weeks
seeing a
out,
women's physio
and the idea
before
is that
and
we
after
help you
birth.
know
And then the
exactly what you
exercises that
need
I
to
would
do
encourage you to do,
to
and
look
like I
after
said
your
earlier in the
body in
podcast,
those
you can
first
add
8
these
weeks
to your
post
warm-up,
baby.
you can add these to
So
accessory
check out details for that in up and
exercises for
coming
some of your big
episodes.
strength lifts if that's what you're doing. You can even do them as you warm down, really, if you like. And these include bird dogs, which is on your hands and knees, doing opposite arm to opposite leg, so really working stability. These are transverse abdominal activators. You can do your dead bugs on your back. You can do inclined press-ups and mountain climbers. You could do your side planks rather than forward planks or front planks. So there's a lot of adaptations you can do. And remember that core training is not just the abdominal muscles. We're looking at glutes as well. So you could be doing your clams, your fire hydrants. You could be doing squats, duck waddles. We're doing diaphragm as well, so we could be diaphragmatic breathing, our 360 diaphragmatic breathing, which if you Google, you will easily be able to find. You can absolutely add those into your warm-up and your warm-down. So have a little think about how you can adapt your current exercises as you go throughout your pregnancy earlier than when you think you can't do it. Try to adapt earlier than when you think you can't do it is my recommendation. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit of and I might have mentioned this already in a podcast. If not, it's in my Ultimate Fitness in Pregnancy mini course, and it's about laying on your back. We hear a lot about not doing exercises on your back, and there is definitely truth to that, because as your uterus grows, you can put extra pressure on the blood vessels that return the blood back to the heart, okay? And in the blood is oxygen. So if you are laying on your back for an extended period of time, you could be squashing or constricting these vessels, and therefore reducing the oxygen back to your heart, and therefore reducing the oxygen to the baby growing in your belly. So when I was doing exercise on my back, I didn't completely avoid them altogether, but I did make sure that I wasn't really on my back for any more than a minute to 90 seconds. And I always made sure that I had double that rest time. So if I was doing, say, dead bugs on my back or glute bridges on my back for a minute, I would make sure I'd have 2-minute recovery before I would do a next set on my back. So hopefully that's helpful information for you. Okay, let me tell you a little bit. Let's finish the podcast with a little bit of a story. So in my first pregnancy, postpartum, I waited for 3 weeks before doing any real type of exercise. And at 3 weeks postpartum, I had 2.5 finger separation of my rectus abdominis. And actually 2 years later, I still had a 1.5 finger gap. And if I'm honest, I actually think that this amount of separation was due to me wanting not to scale back any of my exercises, not wanting to adapt any of my exercises, and my ego telling me and whoever else wanted to look and see and comment was, oh, look at Marnie. She is still doing her planks. Look at that. Oh, look, Marnie's still doing her overhead presses. Oh, look, she's still killing those burpees. Because I could, and I felt great. That was great that I felt great. That was good. I still had a really high fitness level during my pregnancy. However, I am honestly really sure that I made that abdominal separation worse, because I did notice when I was doing quite a lot of exercises, especially the planks, the mountain climbers, and the Russian twists, was I had coning. So the bulge, it wasn't really specific bulge, but my belly definitely looked like a bit of a cone. I didn't really think anything of the time, to be honest. I just thought, this is great that I can still do all these exercises. Now, second time around, at the time of this recording of the podcast, I have a 3-month-old, and I had a 2-finger gap at 2 weeks postpartum. That's when I started doing my prehab exercises. It was actually 10 days, but I'll just round it up to 2 weeks, because the first few anyway was a lot more diaphragmatic work. I had 2-finger separation. So really, I'd only had half a finger extra from my recovery from my first pregnancy. There's probably a lot of reasons for this. So second time round, the separation's already there, so maybe the abdominal wall doesn't need to separate as much. My baby was a little bit earlier, although she was still as big as my first. So I did put on a lot more weight on my second time round. So there could be a lot of reasons. But I do think that actually I was much, much smarter in my pregnancy, with my pregnancy workouts the second time round, than I was the first. And what I mean by that is I really did adapt my exercises from much earlier in my pregnancy. So from about 20 weeks, I really did adapt. And I actually wrote those adaptations down in what weeks I was, and I used these in my regressions journal, so that when I did my postpartum recovery, and I'm still not even wanting to run at any full capacity at the moment, and that comes down to my return to sport program, but I am still following my progressions according to the regressions that I wrote down in my pregnancy fitness journal. Which, by the way, you can get in the Ultimate Fitness in Pregnancy mini course. The link is in the show notes. At the time of this recording, it's free, but it might not be by the time you get there. So I do honestly think that I was able to train much, much smarter. In my head, I was training for my labor process, and I was training for a speedy postpartum recovery. And I was thinking about, how can I strengthen all of my core muscles, not just my abdominals, all of my core muscles during this pregnancy, so that they are still strengthened, they are activated in my postpartum, and I'm reducing the rectus abdominal separation and the linea alba thinning and widening. And I'll just give you a little handful of exercises that I did. I still did overhead, but I did my overhead single arm, and I was very light. I did my incline mountain climbers, I did tricep dips, and I did incline burpees. I took out my jumping probably a little bit later in my pregnancy. I probably maybe wasn't as smart with that one, because I was holding a lot of extra pressure, and towards the end of my pregnancy, I was definitely really struggling with that pelvic floor pressure. So I probably, in hindsight, should have stopped that impact a little bit earlier. What are the other two that I wanted to tell you about? I did quite a lot of glute activation stuff with my bands, so my resistant bands, almost, a good 10-15 minutes before any of my workouts. And I did quite a lot of row for my back strengthening, so quite a lot of rowing. I did some bent over rows with my dumbbell. I also did some rowing on my row machine, ensuring that I wasn't hyperextending the back where I could. Hopefully, hearing a little bit about my story and a little bit of science around core training in pregnancy has given you the confidence and the desire to want to go out there and learn a little bit more. If you'd like to join me on the Ultimate Fitness in Pregnancy guide, do check out the notes below. And I look forward to talking to you in the next episode. If you want to talk about any of these contents with me directly, just reach out on Instagram.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sportsfit Mums Podcast. It's awesome to have you along. If you would like to join our community, follow us on at Sportsfit Mums on Instagram. Alternatively, do check out the subscription notes, as you will see a a link to our Ultimate Fitness in Pregnancy mini guide. From here, you'll also get some details of the up and coming release of the new strength and conditioning prehab program for your 4th trimester. So it's called 8 Weeks Out. And the idea is that we help you know exactly what you need to do to look after your body in those first 8 weeks post baby. So check out the details for that in the up and coming episode.